you phrase it as dictators. Obviously, like that's not what we're trying to
Yeah,
become.
this is like purely in like a benevolent
Yeah.
way. You're not like murdering people.
We really want to host a grassroots music conference. But yeah, we like to call it the yellow pages of the local music scene.
Hello and welcome back to Sound Advice. I am joined at Music Scene HQ with Nina and Connor. How are you both?
I'm well.
Good, thank you, yes.
Yeah, if you just want to sort of introduce yourselves and like what you do.
I'm Connor DeLeo, and I run Music Scene with Nina. I'm also a freelance videographer.
And lots of other things. I'm Nina Himmelreich, and the other director of Music Scene, also a musician and researcher, gardener, amongst other things.
Wow. I mean, before we like get started on Music Scene, I kind of want to talk about like both of you aren't from Liverpool originally, right? So what sort of brought you here and why are you still here, I guess?
So I was born in Germany and then lived a little bit in Hertfordshire, which is why I sound like this, and then was raised as a teenager in the Midlands. Got really into like music in the Midlands. It's very kind of rock and roll, Led Zeppelin, Black Sabbath there. So I was really into music, and then a friend of mine introduced me to Lipper, and I did a trip to Liverpool, and I thought this could be quite cool. So it became my aim to go to Lipper, and went to Lipper, and stayed just because I was quite fascinated about music scenes, and it seemed like Liverpool was a good place to try and like see out that fascination. It's quite small and there's a lot going on, so I stayed.
Yeah, I think similar story. Also born in Germany, which I didn't know that for the longest time, that you were also German.
You didn't know you were born in Germany?
No, I didn't know that part. Also came here to study music. Did some music for a bit, and then decided to do a master's on music industry studies, and now doing a PhD on gender equality in music. So kind of just stuck around, similar to you, for the music scene and the people here. It's a lovely place.
Yeah, because I was about to say that like one of the things that I've heard you talk about before is that like a lot of people tend to like leave Liverpool after they've done like creative stuff here and like go to like London or like cities abroad and stuff. Is there like a particular reason that you like wanted to stay here as opposed to doing something like that?
Yeah, I've had quite a lot of experience doing stuff in London, and you never really feel like you're in a community, I suppose. It's quite big, and you can have like your circle of friends and stuff, but ultimately Liverpool was a lot easier just to like get an idea of what's actually going on, and it's just small, and I don't know, it feels like a village city. Feels like a village
I
city
always
here.
say that. It's like, you go out and you always run into someone, usually somebody you've met through doing music or working in the creative scene. So I think that's a really nice aspect of Liverpool, that you have all the benefits of a major city, but it's small enough to run into people all the time.
Yeah. So if we can go into like sort of the origins of the music scene, I was having a look, and I think like from the outside where this all sort of started is your list of local women in music that you made. Can you sort of tell me about like where the idea for that came from?
I mean, I think work on similar stuff started before that, but the list of women in music was that I went to Connor, I think it was 2020, I don't know, or like pandemic times at least, where I was like, I need to do something about women in music. It's just, they're not represented enough and not supported enough. And I want to do something about it. And we actually initially started talking about doing some live sessions with like local women in music, and just started like talking ideas. And really Connor was just gonna like help me develop some type of project for women in music. And then we started realizing that we have really shared interests and ideas, and that it could actually be a much bigger project also around like work Connor had done before on like...
Yeah, so because of an apartment that I kind of by chance ended up living in, which was right on Fleet Street, directly opposite the club level, it meant that we could make quite a lot of noise, and it looked pretty nice. It wasn't huge, but a bit bigger than the room we're in now. And that was called the Zooniverse, and basically there was a nice little community around that space. And it was really refreshing that it was possible. It was almost like putting a label on a space and making it more than just my apartment. Gave it like, I don't know, a personality. It became a space, like a known entity. And I just opened the doors, filmed so many live music sessions in there. I held jam nights, which really helped bring people together. And just before COVID, I was already thinking like, So we've got a great community here, but it's still not all of Liverpool. Not that I want the whole of Liverpool in my apartment, but I just knew that I was getting a little bit like when they say the Lipper bubble. I'd created a Zooniverse bubble, and I wanted to know what else was out there and start kind of representing that. Then lockdown happened, and I had a lot of time, so I just thought, well, why don't I just try and get a list of as many artists as possible? And it doesn't have to be a complete list. In fact, it never will be, really. It was just kind of an idea I had. And then I wanted to try and use that list, so the database, to track them for new music. So I spoke to like a local developing AI agency. Not that we're using AI in our algorithms, but that's what they specialize in, called DefProc. And they set me up just a cute little thing that kind of connects to Spotify's API. It's a data thing. And it tracks all of the artists on the database that have Spotify for new music every single day and puts the first track in that release into like this master playlist called Liverpool New Music on Spotify. So I'd started like work on trying to get a bigger picture of what's happening in the city. And that kind of led on to a few little other things as well, which is why kind of music scene has become what it is now, because there's like different kinds of information that's useful, not just lists of names. Like obviously new music's helpful, but then gender, as we've realized, is really helpful, and the other stuff that music scene does, which I'm sure we'll get to. So it kind of was born from that, really.
Yeah. So like for the list of local women in music, sort of you released that, and there was over like 270 women in music, right? And so what do you think you sort of took away from that process? Because I guess that was the first time that you'd sort of released data that you'd been collecting in that way, right?
Yeah, what do you think, Nina?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it's the first time that, we released data, but I guess Connor's playlist had been going for a long time before that already, so you could kind of see who was active in the city. But it was, so I went from Connor's kind of database and just went through it and tried to figure out who's a woman on it. And I think the nicest thing about the process, doing it for the third time this year now, so the first year was something like 270, and then the next year we found over 300, and then this year I found over 500. So the more you get accustomed to the data, I guess, the more you realize like what else is out there. And it's really nice. Like Connor knows so many local artists. He'll like know most names on posters where I'm like, I've never even heard of this band. But like the more you kind of engage with it, the more you get to know the scene, which is really nice.
They become your children.
Yeah.
You just get so used to seeing the names, and maintaining the database is pretty, you've got to kind of like, in a non-brutal way, just keep track of who's still in the city, because there's a lot of students, obviously, and some bands kind of break apart, and that's all fine as well. But it was amazing to kind of put that information out there. Raw data in itself is kind of, it's not just about being sexy, but also you want data to be quite interactive. You want to be able to like search what you're looking for. You don't want to just be scrolling down thousands of names. So already having a way in which to present it that people could relate to, and we were distributing those flyers in loads of different places all these past few years. And, it's the incredible minority that say, no, we're not interested. Like most people are delighted. And you can kind of see when we go in, we're like, oh, we got a flyer, and their eyes don't glaze over, but it's kind of like, okay, you got a flyer. And then we tell them it's, a list of women in music, and they kind of light up a bit. And that's really affirming.
True, yeah. And people have actually made use of it as well, which has been really nice. Like we've had promoters tell us that they've used it to kind of achieve more gender balance on their lineups, which is exactly the reason why we made it in the first place. So it's really nice.
Yeah, that's great. So it's kind of from that, I guess, is kind of where sort of music scene was kind of born out of, in terms of wanting to sort of expand how you sort of use this sort of data approach to like track the scene. So just for anyone who isn't familiar, sort of what is music scene?
Well, it's kind of right now it's a website first and foremost, but ultimately it's a place where we want to represent the scene as best as we can. There's quite a lot of data on the website, so it's got new music, it's got artists database, it's got an industry database, it's got a locations map, which we originally were kind of working on one, but there's a great guy called Matt Flynn at the University of Liverpool who has been working on a project called the Music City Mapping Project, and we've ended up sort of linking to his map on the website because it's much better than ours. And then we've got an events database, which we're still figuring out the best way to update that. So yeah, and there's other things on the way. Like we like the idea of there being sort of a video platform. Without going too into it, like over lockdown, another project I did was with a great friend called Callum Huff. We basically copied Netflix exactly, like the look of it, and embedded hundreds of local Liverpool videos in there from YouTube. So we could use them legally without like ripping them off YouTube or anything. It was just an embedding thing, and that became like a video platform that people already sort of recognized because Netflix already existed, and it felt like a bit of a stunt, and it was very difficult to kind of maintain. So that's something hopefully we can do in the future. So yeah, music scene is just sort of there to represent the local music scene. We obviously do live sessions, which is kind of on the video dimension, and there's other things we have in the pipeline, really. So yeah.
But yeah, we like to call it the yellow pages of the local music scene. So just, you know, one place where you can find all the relevant information on what's going on locally.
Yeah, I like that. What's sort of the mission of the project? Like, what are you sort of trying to achieve with this, if that makes sense?
Well, I think representation is a big one, you know, like Connor always says, like, if data is so valuable in terms of, like, if you know what's going on, then you can, you know, make informed decisions about it and, like, be proactive about problems and what else. So I think a big point of it is just making visible how many people do music in the city. Like, it's crazy that we've got over 2,000 artists and we're definitely missing people as well. So it's like, you know, it's a huge chunk of the local population that do music and are creative and are working in this sector. So a big part of it is just making that visible and also making it easy for other people to see that and to then be able to invest into the local music scene and be informed about that decision making, I guess, rather than, because I think it's not necessarily always a conscious choice to just listen to artists from other places. If you have that information in front of you, then you can easily do it, and I think we've definitely found that people use it in that way, which is really nice.
Yeah, I'd add, I'd add to that like the way the music world is presented to a lot of people is like there's the industry, kind of this all-encompassing term, and I feel like if people don't necessarily want to be part of the big industry or find it difficult, at least when they're starting off, there is kind of the local industry. And even though we do have a music board and we've got loads of great venues and institutions and people that are part of this local industry, it's hard to still, even in a small city like Liverpool, really just sort of know what's happening. And the events database is a great example. People have sort of just told us quite a few times now in the interviews we've done that just knowing what's happening would be really great. So I think there's an element of like representing the scene enough to actually make it viable, to make sure people make the right decisions. And there's other things we're doing as well, which kind of are more around like the financial viability of the scene as well, which is quite tricky and stuff. But I do think that would be a dream to kind of create a bit of a thriving local scene off the back of people making better decisions, which is off the back of making databases and stuff that people know so they know what's happening.
Yeah, and also tying in with, you know, like people leave after uni because there isn't enough jobs in the local music scene. I mean, it's probably true, but maybe there's an argument to be made that if we were better connected here and built a proper infrastructure musically here, and there's already so many elements to it, you know, we have labels, we have distributors, we have the shops, the venues, and clearly the musicians. So it's like if it was better connected and more visible, we could actually, as a city, compete with cities such as London rather than like losing people all the time to other cities.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of good stuff there. Like the idea of like there being this like local industry that a lot of people don't know about, something that I've really been trying to do as well. Because like I remember when I first sort of was thinking about launching this, there was like I looked at a few other things out there, and there's a lot of things like how Taylor Swift booked her 200 arena tour, and I'm like, well that's the industry how to, and it's like, well, that's great if you're Taylor Swift, but like a lot of people just want to know who they need to get in touch with to get a gig at the Jacaranda, or like the booker at the Jacaranda wants to know who do I want to like put on to play this indie night, for example. So it's so important to like have that sense of like connection. I think data is like a really interesting way of like doing that, sort of bring everyone together. Is that kind of, my next question would just sort of be like, why does Liverpool need this? And I guess you've kind of already answered it in the sense of wanting to make this a place where this can sort of be its own music hub, because there's a lot of talk about how Liverpool's a music city, but making it somewhere where music can actually thrive without needing to go elsewhere, right?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I don't even know, why does Liverpool need this? I think this is something we often talk about, and then we're like, well, we are just two people. Who are we to say that Liverpool needs it? But I think one of the main things we found is that in Liverpool you can do it, because it is still small enough for us to, you know, I mean, Connor managed to make this list of over 2,000 artists, I mean, throughout lockdown, but still on your own. So it's like, you can do that in Liverpool. Like, that'd be really hard to do in London without like substantial funding to do it in the first place. So I think the ability to do it is maybe why Liverpool needs it. And obviously, you know, like we've already said, the visibility and having like the bubbles that we've mentioned already not maybe engage with each other as much as they could. So it's like bringing all the bubbles into one place to be like, actually all of this exists, because sometimes you don't even know. Like, I remember after lockdown I was like, oh, I've already like seen it all in Liverpool, like I know all the people doing music here. And then I started doing a bit of research again and I was like, I really don't even know like half of it. So, you know, that aspect of it, I guess.
Yeah, and I mean, I suppose as well, there's like, because we have so many sort of unis here in Liverpool that do sort of music and like industry and popular music related courses, as much as you can think that you sort of know the scene, in a year's time there's going to be a whole new set of bands and like creative people who are sort of doing their own interesting projects and like making the scene what it is. And like you said, I think you can do it because it's small, but I do also want to give credit to you guys because I think you're probably two of the best people for the job, if that makes sense. So in terms of like, like you're right that sort of, if you two were trying to take on London, I'm not sure maybe that would work because it's enormous, but it's great that you can sort of be proactive in a smaller scene like this and actually sort of be like, well, we're actually going to try and do something that changes the entire music scene. I think that's really, really cool. So
Thank you.
So you launched Music Scene a couple of months ago now, 3 months ago, something like that?
Yeah, first week of March.
First week of March.
Yeah.
Oh, only a month or so ago then. And sort of how's the reaction been so far?
I think all positive.
Yeah, amazing.
Yeah, we haven't had anybody say bad things, and no one's like trying to catch us out or anything like that, really. Sorry. There are like some people who we've missed on the database. That obviously like everybody's welcome on it. So we'll get some people saying like, hello, you know, like not necessarily in a rude way, but not at the same time kind of either following the channels to put themselves on the database, because everybody can submit themselves. That's, you know, there's a button on the website. So that's easy enough to do. So we've had some people kind of like, I feel a bit hurt that they haven't been found by us already. But that's more just from a jokey sense. Like, it's quite funny because even by them engaging in a slightly like, you know, we're here sort of thing. It's like, well, thanks. We still now know you're there, and you will end up on the database. So there's no hard feelings. Like, everybody's welcome. And that's a big thing as well. Like, worth mentioning is that we're not here to pass opinions. That's kind of how we protect ourselves from representing so many artists, is that we're not going to say you're good or bad, or, you know, too small or too big to be on the database. You know, if you're in Merseyside and you're playing music, you're on the database. So that's quite a big thing as well. Like, so, you know, for all the people out there, we're not judging you. We're just trying to represent you. That's kind of it, really.
Yeah. Well, I guess this is my time to take the issue with the fact that when I first looked, I wasn't on the industry database. And I had to submit myself, and I'm fuming at you, and that's basically the whole reason I'm doing this.
I think in an ideal world, because it really is like, this is something that I've got a sad life, but it does keep me up at night. Like, how do I maintain these databases? And luckily we're raising some funding, and I think we're going to eventually, you know, as things get more and more viable, because we do have a couple of financial kind of plans as well. But maintaining these databases is a struggle. And there's a lot of industry people in the city. There's a lot of changes constantly happening in the events and with the artists. So I think it would be sweet if eventually we became like the standard place for this information to live, so that people do mostly submit themselves.
Yeah, especially, you know, with students coming to the city and stuff, it's really hard for us to, you know who's here for 3 years only and then leave. So if it could become the place where people just go, you know, if you are active in the music scene, submit yourself here, because then people can find you sick. That's like the ultimate goal. But especially with the music industry database, I think we did like, we tried to do as much as we could, but we also just wanted to launch at that point. We were like, let's just do this. The database is going to grow and get populated continuously. Like, that's kind of the point of it. And you figured it out and submit it yourself.
Yeah,
and that's the whole point. Yeah.
If anyone is listening that's like an artist or like an industry professional, have a look on Music Scene. There's like a whole list of databases and stuff where you can check if these guys have been nice enough to add you to their list. And if not, you can sort of submit yourself to be considered for that.
Yes, and we'd love to see it.
I guess you're talking about like sort of it being that people sort of come into the scene and naturally sort of add themselves to this kind of list is kind of the dream, right?
Yeah, I think when we first started going to Lipa, there was this website called Get Into This, which, yeah, whatever, I won't pass judgment. But that was the place where all the reviews and everything lived. So you kind of knew that if you had gotten a review on there, you were part of the scene. And obviously Bidolito still existed at that time as well. So, you know, there were places that were the legitimate, I mean, it wasn't a database in that sense, but it was a database in the sense that, you know, it did include a lot of the local artists. It did include a lot of the upcoming artists. So it was kind of a little bit that it was like you moved here and you got introduced to these publications, and then it was like, okay, I got to be included in these publications for people to see me as a local artist. So, you know, that's kind of the hole we want to fill, because obviously, sadly, that's died. Melodic has died now, which was one of those places as well. So it's like there's definitely, I think, a lack of publications like that. So it's great you're doing this podcast. There's also Boot, is it called? Yeah, which is great that there's, you know, a new music magazine again doing something like this.
What's worth saying as well is that one thing that would, like, not that I'd say this is a negative thing per se, but one thing that would threaten our potency within the scene is if the likes of YouTube, Spotify, and some of the other major websites actually let you filter videos and music by location. Because right now you can't really type into Spotify like Liverpool artists, and artists don't have like a data point about their location.
Yeah.
Otherwise that would make everything so much easier. And I kind of understand why they don't do that, as in these big websites, but that's why we've ended up creating that.
Yeah, you're sort of connecting those dots in a sense.
Yeah,
right?
and I think there's power in that, to be honest, because like the more people know each other and get like there is power in numbers. So like the more we know about who else is doing something here, the more we can advocate for our issues and solve them together, and we'll have a stronger voice. You know, 2,000 people screaming the same thing, you can't like not hear them as much as just one person.
Yeah. I think, by the way, just something to touch on as well, is it's really great that you guys are sort of, this is a completely non-profit venture, right? And it's a CIC.
Yes.
Yeah.
What was sort of the idea behind that decision to do that, as opposed to sort of making it something where you could make some money from whilst doing a good thing, if that makes sense?
I think mainly that Connor and me have both worked in the industry in several ways and have made experiences, and artists are the first people to have to pay for stuff and the last people to get paid. Like, it's genuinely, they are the center of the industry and still are definitely always at the losing end. Like, even if you're on a higher level, you know what I mean? So we both just deeply care about doing something good that benefits the artist. So to be honest, I think that's one of the main discussions we've had over the years, and kind of like, how can we make this financially viable, in the sense of, you know, us getting paid to do the work at the very least. And it's definitely something we struggled with the most. I think we've got some very good ideas for it now, but like for the longest time that was a point of contention, because it was like, well, we could hide it all behind a paywall, but then who's paying for that? It's the artists again. We don't want that. Like, that's not the point of it all, I guess.
Yeah, also, so from my perspective with like the major industry, it's quite a lot of like, you know, you've got a band, or like you've got a label with a roster of bands, and they're always trying to focus on that one band. Kind of, in a sense, it's quite a lot of competition. Like, they've got to kind of understandably like find enough money to be able to tour and all these different things. And because I've done quite a lot of touring with individual artists that I really like as well, it still sort of felt like, it almost felt like when you're on tour with them, they're like the only artist in the world. And there's something I think really seductive, but also it kind of made sense to me to, like, rather than focus on building up one artist for years and years of my life, why don't I try and focus on building up a community of artists? And rather than charging them initially to like use the tools that I'm trying to use to build them up and to bring them all together, you know, I can wait for that community to become strong and viable. And then in theory, you know, money will find its way around that community because it will be sustainable, as opposed to just not giving anybody the kind of right basis on which to grow and then still expecting them to give you money. It's just not very sustainable. So it's like this is the first step, and the CIC can probably remain a CIC because the information is important for everybody to be able to access. But then, yeah, in future, maybe we'll open a venue, and we've got a ticketing system on the way, which, you know, that will sustain things. And eventually, if it gets to the point where we're making or could be making profit and there's no need to reinvest it within ourselves, then it's like, well, we've succeeded. So then we can think about, okay, do we have to start another entity, or do we start doing a fund and giving money away? Like, all these different things.
I'm about to say I was going to sort of come on to like plans for the future. I know you recently got some funding as well and stuff like that, which is pretty exciting. But like, what is the sort of plan for how you'd want to develop music scene for the next like few years?
So Connor's already mentioned the ticketing system, which is a big project that we really want to do. So basically, it's with a company in New York whose name
ViewC, they're called ViewC.
ViewC in New York, who've got a similar idea developed of running a ticketing system for the local community and then having the fees kind of reinvested into projects in the local community. So they've kindly agreed to let us or to work together on this. So, you know, the dream would be that all the promoters in Liverpool would come and use our ticketing system, meaning that the fees would go straight back into, you know, sustaining the community. And if you think about it, it's so genius. Like, I can't believe nobody's come up with this before. But, you know, you can't disrupt the music industry on the national level, like no chance. You've got to really come up with something big there, but you can definitely disrupt the industry on a local level. And again, you know, that gives power to Liverpool as a music city. So yeah, that's one of the big things we are working on right now.
Yeah, the ticketing system would definitely help financially with certain things, and it's not necessarily turning a profit because the fees for the ticketing system are so competitively low that we can't make loads and loads of money out of it. It's just not possible. But it can go towards sustaining a space, and that's something that me and Nina are really passionate about. I'm obviously pushing it quite a lot too, into sort of ever since having the Zooniverse, I realized how valuable a space can be. And to have a space where we can make films, bring people together, do jam nights again, have a bit of a HQ, it kind of makes it real in the physical world. It's not going to be called this, but the concept would be like, if shops are the churches for capitalism, we need like the music scene church for the music scene, like a place where this kind of manifests in real life. And there's loads of options there. We love the idea of kind of having a merch store there of like local bands merch, like bringing that into the one place. And so yeah, the space is really important. And then I've kind of touched upon the video platform. That would be, I think, something really cool for like people to see what's happening in the city, not just new music, but new video. And then I suppose finally, because I can see you want to talk.
No. Two more things. The jobs board as well.
Yeah, the jobs board as well. So where people can kind of be like, look, this is not going to be a permanent job, but we've got like a £50 budget. Does someone want to create this like album artwork or something? So a nice little jobs board. And then I once had the idea of like having a payment system, sort of contactless card machines all around a venue, that it's almost like a kind of big tipping system effectively, where you can tap it once. And in theory, and you know, from a functionality point of view, this does exist, but you don't see it around very often. You can tap it multiple times. So if I won't go too much into it, but most of the value that gets exchanged in the music industry has to be something physical, like a ticket. Like even though you can buy a song and stuff, like that still exists, like the song exists. And the thing that we can't measure, well, let me re-explain that. Everything that we trade money for has to be measurable. So a song is something you can measure, and like tickets and things like that, they're physical things that you can trade. But what you can't measure is emotions. So if you play a really great gig and say like, are you happier? People normally they'll say yeah, but then you can't really charge for that happiness. So I like the idea of kind of putting more attention on like the emotional economy of music, where like you can tap a machine as many times as you feel based on how emotionally moved you've been. And then it would be this idea that there would be like a network of these machines around a venue or venues, and you just sort of get used to starting to like tip when you feel like artists, it. Yeah. So it's not like you've necessarily gained something tangible or measurable, but you've emotionally gained from the experience. And I think that could be quite cool.
That's such an interesting concept, because it's kind of like this weird idea that we have these big databases of songs like Spotify, where the song that you listen to once and never again is worth the same financially as the song that you listened to and cried to and like changed your life, right?
You know what, that's an interesting point. When lockdown started, So, okay, short story. When I was in London, I had like a little tech company thing. It feels like, in a sense, who didn't, you know, I had one of them things, and I got to know a few people in the tech industry. And by lockdown, I'd kind of lost contact with most of them. But I thought, sod it, I'm going to make like a little statement video. And I was like, if we change the like button on Instagram to like just a 1p donation instead of like just being a red heart, like it actually is 1p in value, that would absolutely change lives. And it's not like people on the local level could make like thousands of pounds, but still conceptually the idea of like, even on Spotify, like you were saying, like being able to tip 1p is like how many more times money than in one stream, you know? And it's just 1p. So as somebody who like listens to a lot of music, I could in my head tip 100 songs in one day and only lost £1. But like these artists, you know, there's enough scale, which the internet's good at, it's bringing thousands of people together. I think that concept of tipping, and I know why it isn't viable yet, it's because of transaction fees. It normally costs something like 50p to make a transaction, sometimes less depending on certain currencies. And it means that if you're tipping 1p, whoever's doing that transaction is losing a ton of money. So I understand why, but when things like blockchain currencies and stuff are kind of developing, I'm not saying we should all just switch to crypto. I'm really not a crypto bro. It's more just I'm hoping that these boffins will figure out how to solve that problem, because it could be such an amazing lift for artists.
And it does actually exist in, I don't know, it's a Chinese streaming platform, I think. And there you pay your subscription fee, but then you can actually choose who you want to tip, like who your favorite artist is. So it does, the idea kind of does exist in practice. We just somehow don't have it over here.
See, China do it. Why can't we do it?
I mean, you're kind of coming on to one of the things that I was going to ask you, which is sort of, I mean, first of all, I really like what you said about like how when you exist in like a smaller scene like this, you do actually have like the power to like disrupt, which is like, I think one of the reasons that I thought like starting this podcast would be so exciting. When I was speaking to Boot Music ages ago, and he was saying that that's something that he finds so exciting, is being like, because he did like a placement at Beto Lito, which is where he learned to do journalism basically, and sort of the idea that Beto Lito went and he was like, oh, I can actually do that because it's a small enough scene that I can distribute my magazine to like all the major places that would have Beto Lito and be that. And I think it's really great that you guys have sort of done a similar thing where you're like, well, we can actually be, as you put it, the yellow pages of Liverpool's music industry, and like actually be sort of establish yourself and disrupt, as you said. But the thing about streaming is really interesting, and it's kind of coming on to what I was going to ask, is that like, if you guys, I don't know the position for this, but let's say that you guys just like suddenly were the dictators of Liverpool's music scene, right? You have like full power, you have all the money you need, you can sort of do whatever you want to sort of change the structure of the scene for the better. I'm kind of interested to know like what you would change and what you would do.
Universal basic income for artists.
Ooh, that's a good one.
Definitely. That's just like the best thing you can do to, you know, like most artists will be working a day, like both of us have a day job, you know what I mean? So it's, and then you end up working full time. If it's a job you hate, you drain yourself emotionally, physically, mentally, and then you're expected to make amazing art after that. I mean, sometimes that can fuel the amazing art, but like, you know, you need time and energy to make good art, and surely everybody wants good art because we all love listening to music and, you know, having a soundtrack to our lives. So if people, I mean, I'm all for universal basic income for everyone, but in the concept of artists having it, it's just so good, you know. They could then, they'd probably still have to work a part-time job, but it means that their other part-time job could be being a musician and making great art.
Yeah. What about you?
I think so this is kind of something which obviously you phrase it as dictators. Obviously, like that's not what we're trying to become.
Yeah, this is like purely in like a benevolent way. You're not like murdering people.
Yeah, so music scene is part of a consortium with the Liverpool University and a company called Centralised, which we're trying to raise some funding right now. And we had to create like almost like a model, like a cyclical model as to how a music scene could be run. And I think it kind of, the outlines were like collect information, manage information, distribute information, market that information, bring together the community, educate the community, and then question the community about what they need, kind of work on the infrastructure, then deliver those reports, which are also going to be using AI and big data and stuff to back up those opinions and kind of action plans we build, deliver those to local government and to local stakeholders in the music scene to actually then implement those changes and then monitor those changes and basically just monitor the scene using data and AI as well, not just by talking to people, but trying to get that bigger picture view just to try and keep it healthy. So I think that's kind of the overarching thing, but definitely it'll be around data, bringing people together. It's really important to have those spaces, I think. And, it's not like, we are dictators and we're saying to venues, you have to work with all these other venues. It's just those venues are at least being seen by an entity which can then help.
One more thing I think we need to talk about, though, is, first of all, the consortium, obviously super important. We actually already have the plan for our dictatorship.
Yeah, we do.
But also, as part of that, we really want to host a grassroots music conference, hopefully by the end of this year. We'll see if we're going to collaborate with maybe one of the unis or something like that to do it. But basically, we really think that the big industry, they make decisions for the big industry, but the grassroots industry is kind of, organizes itself. So why not come together and kind of do that a bit more collectively and discuss what issues are there locally that we need to address all together, and can we find a solution? Can we maybe all contribute to finding that solution? And I think Liverpool's a fantastic place for that because people just feel so connected anyways. Like, there's a massive kind of local pride and support in each other. Like, I thought it was crazy to see Red Rum Club selling out. What's it called now? M&S.
Yeah, M&S Bank.
Yeah. Local band getting that local support. That's fantastic to see. So, like, we really think there's an opportunity for us to kind of come together, discuss important issues, and find really good solutions for it as a scene.
Yeah, as a headline, just because me and Nina have been to so many conferences, we'll still go to them. It's just these will be action-oriented conferences where there'll be like breakout rooms, and if we have industry guests, yes, they can introduce themselves, but really we don't necessarily need to hear them wax lyrical about why Spotify is great, or something. And if they're from Spotify, we don't need to really hear about their companies, because the kind of brutal truth is that besides like specific entities, maybe like Help Musicians UK, that actually did really help musicians during lockdown, no one's actually really changing our lives on a local level. Like, we might use their services, and there's still quite a lot of divisiveness about Spotify. And I may as well just quickly say that for me, Spotify, I know people can make money through Spotify, and it's possible. I've heard mixed reviews. Obviously, as a small artist, it's very hard. As an artist that starts getting about 1 million streams, it's actually quite a little injection of funds. It can be quite helpful. But Spotify is about access right now. Like, it's not about making money. For me, if I was a band, I'd be putting my music on Spotify because that's where over 90% of people listen to music, and then the money's a bonus.
Yeah, it's no longer really the product, it's the marketing.
Exactly. And so that's just my view on Spotify. But yeah, in these conferences, there'll be like different breakout rooms. We'd start the conferences by sort of doing a little health report as to how we see the scene and where we might find issues just from what we know. But then we'd definitely start asking questions, and we get these industry experts to choose a room, and then you have to be in that room helping flesh out potential solutions. I'm not saying it's an overnight or in a couple of hours of breaking out, you're going to come up with this miraculous solution. But it's at least a conference that has a massively different tone and kind of mindset to a lot of the conferences that I'm very much used to, which tends to just be stroking the egos of the speakers.
And also accessibility. Like, how much is the Great Escape? I think £180 or whatever and that's when you get the early bird ticket. It's like, these conferences are really expensive, meaning that like a lot of the artists are already excluded from it because it's really expensive to go.
I was doing some research on this actually when I was doing a funding proposal, because we're looking at doing sort of similar, not quite the same sort of breakout concept that you guys have, but doing like a similar idea of like events on like a local level where like artists and local industry people can like really engage with them. And I was doing some research on that, and I think the average UK music conference ticket is £110.
Yeah, it's ridiculous.
Which is crazy because it shuts out everyone who's meant to be going there, which is the artists.
Yeah, and then you have to go to it's not like enough to go to one conference. You need to be at every single conference and be like, hi, yeah, it's me again. Remember me? Like, let's talk some more. And it's like, I think there's one in Manchester, which does look really good. It's Womex, I think, which is like an international. It's £300 or something. God. It's like, what? Like, obviously you're only going to get the same industry people there who can who work for companies that can afford that.
And this kind of goes full circle back to sort of saying that there is that global big industry which can exist and never will go away, but then there has to, I think, be an alternative, a local alternative. So, if there's the big Netflix, but then also if there's the Merseyflix, which is the copy I built, it's like, well, you have a choice now.
Yeah.
And this big industry, let's face it, attention economy, blah, blah, blah. If you could spend 100% of your time listening to their artist, that's what they want in an ideal world, really, because that's what makes them all the money. But then, really, if they have the choice to listen to the local stuff, we are then actually genuinely threatening this bigger industry, which that isn't something, I'm not about threatening people, but I want to give people the choice. And then in the end, if we have a thriving culture and people are singing songs about things you can relate to, like MC Nelson about the People's Republic of Liverpool, like stuff like that, I'd always rather listen to that than sort of something that removes a lot of the meaning and culture around what they're singing so it can appeal to a larger audience. So, yeah.
Yeah. Thank you very much for both coming on. It's been an absolute pleasure. Where can people find Music Scene?
Musicscene.info. And that's seen with your eyes.
Yes.
S-E-E-N. Nice little pun.
Yeah, awesome. Well, thank you very much for coming on the show.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you so much for having us.